So whenever the discussion of the wealth tax comes up, you can already anticipate CNBC having like a week's worth of meltdowns, and they may even invite on a billionaire or two who will literally cry on national television at the mere thought of the wealth tax. It's not like it has any chance of passing in the near future, but just the thought that anyone would want a wealth tax and that any politician would propose this is enough to bring at least one billionaire to tears. I'm, of course, dunking on Leon Cooperman because I think that we should make fun of him for the rest of his pathetic life. Having said that, though, Anand Giridharadas was on CNBC, and the host was pressing him to explain why he would support the wealth tax when it very obviously is nothing more than a war on the wealthy. It's a war on the rich. Why would you do this? Why would you penalize a minority in this country, target them, when there are other ways to accomplish your goal? What Anand did here was just phenomenal.
You're in favor of Elizabeth Warren's wealth tax. In fact, you make the argument that the numbers that she throws out may be too low, when others come on this network who've done quite well for themselves and who are quite generous in their own right and say there are just better ways of doing things. Why bog down the system with something new? If you want to raise more taxes from the wealthy, who, by the way, come on this network all the time and say the wealthy should pay more, there are just better ways to do it. Close loopholes, raise the capital gains tax. Why a wealth tax, which seems to be a war on the wealthy?
It's not a war on the wealthy. When regular people across this country pay property taxes on their house, which is a tax on their wealth, not their income, no one calls that a war on them. It just so happens that very rich people have most of their wealth in things other than one home. And a wealth tax is far from a war. The war, if anything, has been waged punching down on the middle class and working class and poor people of this country for a generation. The idea that a wealth tax is an act of hostility or is an act of vengeance, when it's in fact an act of sound economic policy, is laughable. And I'll explain. There's an economic rationale for it, which is that it would be great to have that money lying around to actually reinvest in the commons, which has been defanged, defunded, and delegitimized in this country, in childcare, universal childcare, in healthcare, in education, things like that. But there's a second reason, Scott, which is there is actually, and I know this is CNBC, but even without the funding issue, there is actually an argument to be made that there is a certain level of absolute wealth beyond which people are simply, just by breathing, too powerful to exist in a democracy that still thinks it's a democracy. Because simply by acting, spending that money, they are exerting power that is inconsistent with one person, one vote. I think Elizabeth Warren's wealth tax is a great idea. Bernie Sanders had a great proposal for a short-term pandemic one, a more general one.
I know you think it's a great idea.
I think all of them are too small. We need an erosive wealth tax that would shrink those fortunes and put some eros back in the economy.
So I don't have much to add because I think that Anand did a phenomenal job here, but I do have a couple more points that I want to put in to supplement his argument. First of all, he talks about how, look, I bring on billionaires on my program, and they all tell me the same thing, that they think that they're paying, too low of taxes. They want their taxes to be increased. So why would you pursue this wealth tax that just seems like overly confiscatory and just punitive? First of all, let me just say that CNBC host should be ashamed of himself. Like, what a fucking bootlicker. Like, this goes beyond bootlicking. Like, he's deep-throating the boot. He's choking on the boot, and he should be embarrassed with himself. But, I mean, here's the thing that he should be asking his billionaire guests. Why is it that you store your wealth on offshore bank accounts? Why is it that in the event we were to pass more taxes on you, you just hire more lawyers to your already gigantic team to find ways to exploit the tax code? Like, you say one thing, but you do another. It's almost like you're full of shit. And that the wealth tax actually would meaningfully take the wealth that you own away from you. I mean, CNBC is a network by and for elites, but even they have to feel bad with how disingenuous they are. And it's funny, like when they actually talk to someone who knows his shit, they have no response. So if it is the case that we accept that the wealth tax is a war on the wealthy, war on the rich, then why don't we call property taxes the same thing? Why is it that all of a sudden we're changing the language that we use when it comes to wealth owned by billionaires? But most working class and middle class Americans, if they're going to own any wealth, it's going to be in a home. So that property tax, you're not crying over that, but you're crying over the wealth tax of like 2%? Give me a fucking break. Give me a fucking break. So that was a phenomenal point that Anand brought up there. And, this prospect of, oh, well, there's this war on the rich that you want to wage. He makes it seem as if that's bad. But a war on the rich, that's like a good thing. You shouldn't mention it because that's a really good idea, actually, if you don't want war on the rich. Because what the rich has done throughout the past decades is they've waged a war on the poor. They've effectively shifted the tax burden away from them and onto the working class. And look what that has done in America. Look what that's done to society. So for you to make it seem as if it's inherently bad to wage a war against elites, we absolutely should be targeting them, going after them, and bullying them because what they've done to American society is unacceptable. And you can make the case that you shouldn't go after individuals and that institutions are more important. Sure, that's fine. I hear you. But Anand also makes the point that when we are in a capitalist system, to have wealth, you have power if you have that much wealth. There's a reason why policy outcomes reflect elites and special interests and not working class Americans. This is according to a 2014 Princeton University study by Drs. Gillens and Page. It's because they have money to buy politicians, lobby the government, get what they want, whereas working Americans, they can't do that. So in a capitalist society, wealth equals power. So it's not just that they have too much wealth and the distribution needs to change. It's that much wealth is not conducive to a healthy democracy. And Anand makes the point that, if we take the money that these elites have and don't need with this wealth tax, we could then redistribute those resources to fund better public programs. Except you don't even have to do that. Like modern monetary theorists would argue that you don't even have to tax the rich in order to, fund social safety net programs. But I would argue that you can make that case if you think it's more persuasive and you're going to convince more people. But the key issue here is that wealth equals power in a capitalist society. And to be a billionaire means that you have an inordinate amount of power. It's not just one person, one vote any longer. This has broader implications on democracy. And if you truly care about democracy, then you can't also simultaneously support the existence of billionaires because billionaires have more power than the working class and normal Americans. And the power level must be equal if you truly want a democratic society. So that's all I'll say. I'll leave that there. I think that we should all save this clip from Anand because he showed us exactly what we have to say to dispute the wealth tax. It's not like arguing against it is hard anyway because they don't really have an argument. It's just, hey, you're being mean to the rich, stop discriminating and being bigoted against rich people.
Wealth is under attack.
But this really, it takes it to the next level. Anand here shows how foolish their argument against the wealth tax really is. And it's brilliant.